I'll never forget the sound of the wrapping paper tearing. It was the only sound in the room. No laughter, no chatter, just that sharp, brittle crinkle as my daughter Mia carefully unwrapped her gift. Her tiny fingers worked at the edges with such care, like she was uncovering a treasure. For a fleeting moment she smiled, a fragile, hopeful smile, the kind kids have when they still believe in miracles. But when she lifted the lid of the box, her face fell. First confusion, then a deeper shadow. Betrayal. Her shoulders stiffened, and she looked at me, eyes wide with a question she didn't dare ask. The box was empty. Nothing but a hollow cardboard shell. No toy, no note, not even a scrap of tissue paper. Just nothing. Before I could process it, a harsh laugh cut through the silence. My father, Victor, leaned back in his leather recliner, arms crossed, his voice like a blade. Kids like her don't deserve anything. Too many freeloaders in this world already. My heart sank. Mia froze, her hand still inside the box, as if she might find something if she just looked harder. But there was nothing to find. Then my sister Claire chimed in with a sneer. She's just like her mother, always expecting handouts. Useless. My chest burned, my hands shaking in my lap. I wanted to scream, to defend her, but the words stuck in my throat like broken glass. I looked at Mia. Her lips were pressed tight, her chin trembling, but she was too proud to cry. Her eyes, those big, trusting eyes, were brimming with tears she refused to let fall. She looked at me again, not for help, but to see if she should pretend it didn't hurt. And in that moment, I hated myself. I hated that I'd brought her here, to this sterile penthouse in Manhattan for a so-called family New Year's Eve party, hoping, foolishly, that my father might show an ounce of kindness. I wanted them to see the incredible, gentle, artistic girl Mia was, to love her like I did. But they didn't see her. To them, she was just a reflection of my failures, my divorce, my struggles, the life they thought I'd ruined. The room was suffocatingly quiet, save for the faint hum of the city traffic 40 floors below and the slow tick of Victor's antique desk clock. Each second felt heavier, like a countdown to something I wasn't prepared for. Mia looked down at the empty box, her fingers brushing the edge. Then she whispered, "I made you a gift too, Grandpa." Everyone turned. Victor's smirk froze on his face. "Oh, really?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Let's see it then." But Mia didn't waver. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, so carefully made it broke my heart to see. She stepped forward, holding it out to him with both hands. And I knew right then, this moment was far from over. Something was coming, something none of us saw coming. I hadn't been back to my father's Manhattan penthouse in 3 years. Not since the divorce, not since the humiliation, not since the life I'd been trying to hold together shattered beyond repair. Mia had begged to meet her grandfather. A month before New Year's Eve, she looked up at me with those pleading eyes and asked, "Mom, do I have a grandpa?" Her voice was so small, so curious, like she was trying to piece together why our holidays were always just the two of us. No big family dinners, no cousins to play with, no traditions to hold on to. I hesitated, but I said yes. And when she asked if we could visit him this year, I said yes again, against every instinct screaming inside me. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I thought time had softened Victor's edges. Maybe I believed that when he saw Mia, really saw her, he'd feel something. Regret, warmth, anything. Instead, the moment we stepped off the elevator into his pristine penthouse, I felt that familiar weight settle on my shoulders, the kind of tension that wraps around your chest like a vice, forcing you to smile through the pain. The penthouse was as cold and imposing as ever. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline, modern furniture that looked more like art than comfort, an air that smelled faintly of expensive cologne and polished marble. My mother, Evelyn, greeted us with her practiced smile, a quick, stiff hug for me, and a pat on Mia's head, her eyes lingering on the frayed hem of Mia's coat with thinly veiled judgment. Claire, my sister, didn't even look up from her wine glass as we walked in, muttering a distracted, "Hey," before returning to her phone. My brother Ethan was there too, slouched on the couch, scrolling through his tablet, barely acknowledging us. And then there was Victor, my father, sitting at the head of the room like a king on his throne, a glass of bourbon in one hand, a cigar in the other. He didn't stand to greet us, just gave a curt nod and said, "Didn't expect you to show up." That was his version of a welcome. Mia, oblivious to the frost in the air, gave him a shy wave, her little scarf still wrapped around her neck. "Hi, Grandpa," she said softly, testing the word like it was a fragile thing. He grunted in response, his eyes flicking over her like she was an inconvenience he hadn't planned for. I don't know why I kept hoping for more. Maybe because Mia had tried so hard. She'd spent weeks making little gifts for everyone. Hand-drawn cards, each one carefully colored and folded, with their names written in her wobbly handwriting. She'd even asked me how to spell "to Aunt Claire" because she wanted it to be perfect. Every night after dinner, she'd sit at our tiny kitchen table, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on them. I wanted this to be special for her. I wanted her to feel like she had a family, even if they were far from perfect. I'd scrape together every penny I could from my waitressing shifts to buy her a new dress, a small gift of my own, and enough gas to make the trip from our cramped apartment in Queens to Manhattan. That morning, as I tied her scarf, she looked up at me and asked, "Do you think they'll like my cards, Mom?" I forced a smile and said, "Sweetie, they're going to love them." But deep down, I knew the truth. I was bringing her into a place where kindness was a currency they never spent, where love came with conditions I could never meet. Still, I tried. I told myself this was for Mia, not me, that I could keep my head up, play nice, pretend for one night that everything was okay. But as I watched her heart break over something as cruel as an empty gift box, I realized they hadn't changed, and I wasn't sure they ever would. Mia had handed out her cards earlier that evening, moving through the room with such care, like she was afraid to take up too much space. Each card had a name on the front in her careful handwriting. She gave one to Evelyn first, then Claire, then Ethan, who barely glanced at it before setting it aside. When she got to Victor, she hesitated, but then smiled and said, "Happy New Year, Grandpa." He didn't look up from his drink, just held out a hand like she was delivering a bill, not a piece of her heart. She came back to sit beside me on the couch, her face still bright with hope. She had no idea how cold the room had become. Then Victor reached for a box from under the sleek glass table that served as the centerpiece of the room. It was wrapped in gold paper, tied with a black ribbon. Too perfect, too deliberate. He held it out to Mia with a grunt. "For you," he said. Her eyes lit up. "For me?" He shrugged. "Your name's on it, isn't it?" She looked at me for permission, and I nodded, even though a knot tightened in my stomach. She slid to the floor, pulling the box into her lap, her small hands running over the paper like it was something sacred. I watched her savor every moment, the careful peeling of the tape, the slow unfolding of the wrapping. She wanted to remember it. Then the lid came off. She peered inside, and I saw the exact moment her hope shattered, her eyebrows knitted together in confusion. She reached in as if something might be hidden at the bottom. She looked up at me, uncertain. There was nothing in the box. Victor laughed, a loud, cruel sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "What, you thought you'd get something real?" He scoffed. "The world doesn't give gifts for just showing up, kid." Mia blinked, her hands frozen. I couldn't move. Claire, always ready to twist the knife, added from her corner of the couch. She's just like her mom, always expecting people to hand her things. No surprise there. I felt the words like a slap. I turned to her. Claire, stop. She raised an eyebrow, smirking. What? It's true. Mia was silent now, the box still in her lap, flaps wide open, exposing the emptiness inside. The room had turned on her, and I saw her realize it. I hated them for making her feel small, for making her question her worth, for laughing like it was all a joke. I reached for her, but she didn't move. She just kept staring at the box, like it might fill itself if she waited long enough. Inside, I was screaming, say something, stand up, defend her. But I didn't want to make a scene, not in front of her. That's the thing about families like this. You learn to freeze when things get cruel. You learn to smile through the pain. I'd spent so many years doing just that, it almost felt normal. But this wasn't normal. Mia was only 7. She didn't know how to mask her hurt. She didn't know how to swallow that kind of pain. Then she looked up at Victor, her voice barely a whisper, but clear as a bell. It's okay, she said. I made you a gift too, Grandpa. And just like that, the whole room shifted. No one spoke. No one laughed. Mia reached into her jacket pocket, and I realized something was about to happen that none of them would ever forget. I stared at her, completely still, as she pulled out a folded piece of paper. It looked so small in her hand, so fragile, like something that could be dismissed without a thought. But she held it like it was everything, like it meant something. I whispered, Mia, maybe not now. She turned to me, and there was something in her eyes I didn't recognize. Not sadness, not hurt, but a quiet strength. She gave a little nod, the kind that said, I have to do this. Then she turned to Victor. I made this for you, she said. Victor didn't even lean forward. He just glanced at it with that same bored expression he always wore when someone dared to ask him to feel something. Oh, really? He muttered, sipping his bourbon. What, you draw me a skyscraper or something? There was mockery in his voice, the kind he used to make you feel small without raising a decibel. But Mia didn't flinch. She walked across the room and held it out to him with both hands. That's when I noticed her fingers were trembling. I knew that feeling, the way your hands betray you when your heart's pounding, when you're trying to be brave even though every part of you wants to run. He took it from her like it was nothing, unfolding it with one hand while still holding his glass in the other. Then he looked down and stopped. I couldn't see what was on the paper from where I sat, but I saw his face. It didn't twist in irritation or amusement like I expected. Instead, his eyebrows drew together. He blinked once, then again. His jaw slackened, just slightly like he'd forgotten where he was. The entire room seemed to lean in. What is it? Claire asked, her voice sharp with impatience. He didn't answer, just stared. Mia stood there, hands clasped in front of her now, watching him quietly, like she wasn't sure what came next. I got up and crossed the room slowly, almost afraid to break the moment. I stepped beside her, placing my hand on her back. She didn't look at me. She just kept her eyes on Victor. And he looked older than I'd ever seen him. Not angry, not smug, just still. He folded the paper carefully, deliberately, almost reverently, and placed it on the glass table next to his chair. Then he stood up. No one knew what to say. No one moved. He walked out of the room without a word, the sound of his footsteps echoing down the hallway. He didn't slam the door, didn't shout, just left. I looked down at Mia, her voice quiet when she asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I knelt beside her, wrapped my arms around her and whispered, "No, sweetheart. You did something brave." Claire muttered something under her breath. But this time I didn't care, because I knew whatever Mia had drawn, whatever she had written, it had gotten through to him in a way none of us ever could. She didn't fight back with anger. She didn't cry or scream or run. She gave him a gift, one that reminded him he was still human, even if he'd forgotten. And I think, just maybe, that scared him more than anything else. Victor didn't return for the rest of the night. He didn't come back for the countdown to midnight, didn't join us for the catered dinner Evelyn had ordered, not even when she called out in her overly bright tone that the champagne was ready. Mia didn't mention him again that evening. She played quietly with the ribbon from one of her other small gifts, helping me fold the wrapping paper scraps like it was any other night. But I could tell her mind was elsewhere. Every now and then, her eyes would drift toward the hallway where Victor had disappeared, like she was waiting for something. But nothing happened. Not that night. We left early the next morning. I told them we had plans back in Queens. But the truth was, I couldn't bear to stay another second in that suffocating penthouse. Claire didn't even get up to say goodbye. Evelyn handed me a bag of leftover pastries and told me to be careful on the subway, her voice devoid of warmth. No one asked how Mia was doing, and that hurt more than their coldness ever could. The ride home was quiet. Mia stared out the subway window, watching the tunnels blur past. I reached over and held her hand. At one point, she squeezed back. I didn't bring up the drawing. I didn't want to make her explain something so personal, didn't want to unravel the magic of that moment. But I thought about it the whole way home. What had she drawn that made my father, the man who once told me I'd never amount to anything, go pale and leave the room without a word? I found out 5 days later. A small, unmarked package arrived at our apartment, left outside our door. It was addressed to Mia in careful, unfamiliar handwriting. She opened it slowly, like she was afraid to hope. Inside was a delicate porcelain figurine, a tiny ballerina, mid-twirl, her dress painted in soft pinks and blues. It was the kind of thing you'd find in an antique shop, something old and cherished. There was a note, just one line in that same shaky handwriting. To the kindest girl I know, thank you for seeing me. No signature, but we didn't need one. Mia clutched the figurine to her chest, her eyes shining. She didn't say anything at first. She just held it and smiled. I sat down next to her on the floor and finally asked, Mia, what did you draw for Grandpa? She looked up at me, her voice soft. It was a picture of him smiling with Grandma. And you. I wrote that I hoped he'd smile again someday, because I know how much he misses her. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak, because that was it. That was the part of him I'd forgotten even existed. The man who used to laugh, who used to dance with my mother in the kitchen before grief turned him cold, before the years made him bitter. Mia saw through all of that and gave him a piece of something he thought he'd lost forever. Not pity, not guilt, but hope. She didn't try to fix him. She just reminded him that he used to be someone worth remembering, and in return he gave her something too. Maybe not love, maybe not forgiveness, but a beginning. And sometimes that's enough. The figurine now sits on Mia's dresser. Every night before bed, she touches it gently, not always to look at it, sometimes just to know it's there, like a talisman of that moment. She hasn't said much about that day since, but every now and then, she'll mention Grandma, someone she never met but speaks of like she knows her, through the stories I've told and the empty space she left behind. Victor never called. He didn't send a follow-up message, no apologies, no explanations. That's not who he is, maybe not who he'll ever be. But a week after the figurine arrived, I got a letter. It wasn't for Mia, it was for me. It was short, 3 lines in that same uneven handwriting. I misjudged you. She's a special kid. I hope you're okay. No name, but I knew. And for reasons I can't quite explain, I cried after reading it. Not because it fixed the years of silence, or the way he used to look at me like I was a failure, but because for once it felt like he saw me. More than that, he saw Mia. He saw what I've always known, that she's extraordinary, that she has this way of cutting through the coldest hearts and showing people their own light, even when they don't deserve it. She's not loud. She doesn't demand attention, but she changes things. She changed him, not completely, but enough. Enough to make a man who'd built walls around his heart open a window, just a crack. Enough to make someone who believed only in power and control sit down and listen to the quiet truth of a little girl's drawing. People ask me sometimes why I went back that New Year's Eve, why I let them near her, why I didn't protect her better. The truth is, I thought I was. I thought keeping her away from their coldness would be enough, that avoiding them, not talking about them, would shield her heart. But Mia didn't need protection. She needed truth. She needed to meet them, to see the world for what it is, beautiful and harsh, broken and hopeful, all tangled together. And instead of being crushed by it, she chose to shine her own light. She didn't need revenge. She didn't even want an apology. She just wanted to give a gift. And that gift, as simple as it was, did something I couldn't do in 30 years. It opened a door, not wide, not forever, but enough for a note to slip through, enough for a figurine to find its way to her, enough for a tired old man to remember a part of himself he thought was gone. Mia taught me something that day. Sometimes kindness is the greatest rebellion. A whisper can carry more weight than a shout. And when we choose love, even when it's hard, even when it's not returned, we create something no one can take away. If this story touched you, if it made you feel the power of a child's heart, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Tell me, what's the kindest gift you've ever given or received? And if you want more stories that remind you of the strength in kindness, the magic in the quiet moments, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We've got so many more stories to share. Stories that will make you laugh, cry, and believe in the power of hope. Next week, we'll dive into a tale of a family secret uncovered at a wedding. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, keep shining your light, because you never know whose darkness it might touch.